Hi guys, and welcome back to Offgrid and Connected. Today's episode is with Rohan Sutherland, who is a friend of mine that I met in Malawi and have since followed as he has been doing lots of different things, from building in Cameroon to creating networks of off-gridders and Earthship-inspired communities, and is now working with his with some partners on his own company, his own projects in California, and working with education and research into properties of different materials and techniques and structures to gather data, to be able to show people data of how stuff works or why stuff doesn't work. So very interesting, very all-round, finger on the pulse of the off-grid community, and a real pleasure to talk to. So I hope you enjoy this. Before we get on to it though, I just wanted to send out a message to people to ask if anyone knows of people who have good, strong, real experience in local currencies or setting up cryptocurrencies. Do get in touch. I'm going to have a few interviews in the not too distant future with people that are involved in this area. I think it's really exciting and have a few ideas I'd like to share eventually. But in the meantime, do send anyone my way, or any books or recommendations or videos. Please do just put them in the comments or send me an email. It'd be really great to get that. So thanks for listening, as always. Any contributions, always super welcome. We're not quite breaking even, so anything that can help that the podcast isn't in danger at all. It's a real passion project, and I get so much out of it in terms of people I speak to and questions I'm able to ask. But it would be great to be breaking even. So, with all that said, a strange order of introduction, I think, but this is Rohan, and please enjoy. Hey, Rohan, welcome to the show. It's good to speak.
Hi, Pat. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, we've found it a little bit hard to get our busy schedules to synchronize, but here we are.
Cool. I mean, today I know we've spoken a lot, sort of off. We've spoken a lot when we were working together and stuff, but a lot has happened in that time. We're talking about 6 years now, I think it is. And I just wanted to get an idea of all the different things you've been involved in, because I see you on lots of different socials and stuff, and very active. So how could you take us on a bit of a whirlwind tour of sort of where your off-grid journey began and go from there?
Oof, yeah, I could try. It started basically, I mean, I studied international relations, and I specialized in sustainable development and adaptation to climate change. So I started working with the UN, international NGOs, also worked with companies who were trying to do, that kind of work. And, it led me to do more of my own research and diving into permaculture and different types of sustainable building techniques, which I started overseeing projects, but I didn't, I wasn't putting my hands in the dirt, so to speak. And so there was one mission I was in Cameroon. It was working with the government on adaptation to climate change, trying to basically help them create strategies and policies which would cross all of the different, departments, and have a focus on how the public sector, but then specifically looking at small communities, how to help them in this, climate change hadn't actually come to the point where it's now. It was still the moment where people would think, it's still, that's far away. That's like in 100 years or something. Now I think people have really come to realize, oh no, it's happening. It's already happening, and it's going to get worse. So I think just kind of looking at these projects, specifically with small rural communities, I started to do my own work on the side and working with communities myself outside of the work. And I was, just kind of getting techniques, reading, watching, videos, etc., and studying, to install biodigesters and doing a little bit of reforestation and all of these kinds of works. And that's when I actually, saw that Earthship was doing a build in Malawi. And as I was in Africa, I thought this is a great kind of bridge. I've been wanting to learn this for a long time. Now they're here. And this is where I met you, Pat.
Yeah, absolutely.
But during that time, what happened in Cameroon too is I all this kind of work with different communities. I came across an orphanage, a specific one that was having a lot of troubles, and it was basically living, day to day. So, if say a child had a medical problem, the responsible for the orphanage, we call her Mamado, would have to, go back to the capital, go and speak to different people to get some money so that the child could go to the hospital. And same when school would start, she would have to, go to all these different people to try and get enough money to get them to school. And I could just, tell that it was really, 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 really such a hard work for her to do. So, just talking about how things were going for them and their vision for the future. They really wanted to have a center. They really wanted to have an actual orphanage. The children were staying at their home, in their home, and sleeping, some of them on the floor, some of them were like a ton on a bed, and the beds were in pretty dire state. So I basically thought, okay, so you want to build something new. And they already had an architect kind of draw some plans, but it was the typical kind of building that people would want in Cameroon, which is basically, cement blocks all together. And having lived in the country for a while and having stayed in some of these houses, it's just horrible. Like it just gets so warm during the day, but even at night. So in some of these places where I had been staying, I actually had to go outside, sleep outside with the mosquitoes, risk of getting malaria, but just, because these houses were just so unbearable. However, what had happened is what's happening in a lot of different places in the world with globalization. It's to say our traditional building techniques are the past. They're, Stone Age, as, maybe in the West we would think of anything that's kind of ancient. So if someone earns a little bit of money, say in a village, going to work in the city, and then comes back and is going to build a house, it will be with those kinds of materials. So I just looked at their plans, and there was really nothing. It was just a typical house kind of connected to the grid. Other problem in Cameroon is you have frequent electrical cuts, so they just cut the electricity at different moments, especially in neighborhoods that, may be a little bit more precarious. And so I actually saw that at the orphanage where all the children were doing their homework and suddenly the electricity would go off and stay off for like an hour, and then they would have to go to bed. So they could not even study or do their homework. So it was just kind of thinking of that, and then just thinking, okay, sure. So if we say manage to get the money to build this, then you still have the same problems. You still have to go and get the money for education, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where like my mind started going in, trying to envision this way for them to build a center which would at the same time be a solution to all of these different problems that they have. So as to try and integrate all kinds of systems to create, some kind of resilience, self-sufficiency, etc.
Sorry to interrupt, but with your experience of the UN, do you feel like these sorts of institutions are open to these ideas, or is there some resistance? What's your take on that?
No, I do think there is some openness. The UN is a very big and complex beast. So you have within the UN different organizations that, specialize in these things, and they are competing in a sense to get finance to be able to do specific things. So I wouldn't say that the UN is against these things. I think, a lot of the reports, which for some people might think, are natural, say to look at the future of farming as small scale, family, very localized farms, organic, of course, etc. These reports come from the UN. So there is a movement in there that wants this, but whenever you're dealing with a big bureaucracy, it's hard to get solutions to really go at the kind of speed that we would like them to go. So for me, in a sense, to kind of go and try to do my own research and my own projects was, in a sense, a little bit, due to that fact, the feeling that, no, I want to be able to do it myself. And then not reliant on other people and sometimes their personal interests as well, which kind of go in the way. My whole initiation in permaculture and natural building specifically came from that original vision of creating this orphanage in Cameroon to be an answer to those specific issues that they were experiencing. And I think through my travels, which involved different continents, it was all about learning. But I ended up being in places where, suddenly a disaster would happen, and being, kind of connecting, of course, with the people who were like-minded, interested in the same things, doing different projects, from their hearts, from their feeling of what they thought was right, and or helping specific populations who they thought needed help. We kind of created communities, networks, and were able to apply some of these things that we had learnt to these situations, disaster relief. And I think that was probably one of the best schools that I would have had, because I had already, had the education with earthships, but we're talking about specific systems, which are, like specific materials, a specific design itself, specific systems which require different technologies. And actually, just going on to that one, I don't know if you remember, actually, in Malawi, I think it was Lou who showed us, they had a specific pump for the water. And, like having seen that the tires had to be, like transported from very far away, that we were using a ton of cement, which nobody was using in the village. There were just all these kind of questions that were coming to a lot of us. I remember a lot of the volunteers. And I remember when that pump came up, and it was, it looked very high tech. And a lot of us would ask, okay, but what's going to happen when that pump breaks? How do they replace it? And this is a village, just to give a little bit, had no electricity. Water was from maybe a little source, a stream or something. And so, we just thought, how are they going to be able to replace this? And in a sense, maybe luckily, we connected the pump and it didn't work. It must have broken during the travel or something. And so at that point, we created a low-tech pump, which was much more suited to them. And so I think a lot of this, when you're thinking of disaster relief, or when you're thinking of populations who do not have a lot of means, you really do have to take the time to think of exactly what is appropriate in that situation for that environment and for those people. And so disaster relief really brings you to that level of kind of having to really understand what people are living. And so in every single case, we were living with the populations, listening to them. So a lot of times they have community groups. When things go right, these community groups actually kind of cease to exist, because, everybody's got their own job, they have whatever they need, the kind of individualistic, way society works right now. And so what we would do is we would come and try to find these community centers, which through the crisis now became the hub, is where all the food, is where clothing, is where all these different things would kind of come, and then they would give them to the different people in the neighborhood. And also they would have these meetings where they talk about their situation, etc. And I really deeply believe in this. Anyone who wants to do anything that to do with humanitarian disaster relief, please do not, devise a project from your house, wherever it is, for other people who are far away and where you do not necessarily have that knowledge of how they're living. You really do need to be there, and you need to spend the right amount of time in that preparation phase. It's really important. I just have to say that.
No, I hear you. I mean, there's some really classic examples of development work going sort of strangely wrong, aren't there? I remember one about, I think it was something as seemingly obvious as a water pump in the middle of the village rather than a walk that was required, and people weren't using it, and they sort of went back and tried to figure out what was wrong, and they realized that a lot of the women in the village actually really enjoyed the walk down to the water. I'm not saying long walks, I know that can be really tragic sometimes, but this was a reasonable walk that allowed them to gossip and just be away from the men and talk, and that kind of thing is something that's very hard, as you say, to figure out from your own living room.
Absolutely. No, and that specific example that you're giving, I think is a really interesting one, because that village was an extremely conservative Muslim village. And so the women had only that moment where they would walk to get the water in this dirty river, polluted river, etc. But it was their moment of freedom. It was the moment where they could chat together, where the young ones could meet, their potential boyfriend or future husband by the river, chat as well. And then they would come back home and they would spend the rest of the day cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, etc. And exactly as you say, it's like this is an NGO at the end of the year who is getting finance. So a very typical kind of situation within the UN, getting finance. And during the whole year, a lot of them try and save money. And then when the end of the year comes, they see that they still have all this money left. They want to spend it in order to be able to get the same amount of finance the next year. Because if they don't spend up all the money, they're not going to get as much the next year. And so a lot of these NGOs are just going for whatever project just to basically spend money. Yeah, so this preparation phase is absolutely vital. And so, as you were saying, for this specific example, I think if the person had tried to understand that, instead of, say, walking 2 miles, they could have walked half a mile, but at least, and had, pure drinking water wherever that well would have been, but at least, still had a little bit of that freedom. So yeah, so connecting with the people, listening to them and understanding their situation, their problems. And then the other thing too is when there's a crisis, it could be a landslide, an earthquake, fire, whatever it is, you're going to have a ton of materials present. It could be urbanite from bits of concrete broken. It could be old adobe homes that are kind of damaged, and even the owner needs help destroying the rest of the walls. And so what we would do is, say, coming in an area where there had been a landslide, terrible pollution from the landslide because there were mines, so all the toxic waste got mixed up, plus the sewage. I mean, it's pretty horrible stuff. And so we did not, that was good clay though, but we did not want to use it to build with. And so we would go and help people. That's why I came up with the term biodestruction, because we would be helping these people take every brick of adobe one by one, and we would stay clear of the percolation kind of level. You could see where the water had kind of risen into the adobes, and so we would just take whatever was above that. And so from there, we had now what we could use as a mortar, as a plaster, because we could just break them down, put them in water, and we already have a ready mix to use. Sometimes we just had to make a few changes, but it's pretty much already done for us. So your life can actually be a lot easier if you also do the preparation to find what you have around the place where you are. And so one example also was in Valparaiso. There was a fire. It was in Chile, and it's a port town, so they had a lot of spare pallets, and then they also have a lot of agriculture. And so we had the pallets, we had the straw, and we had these, leftover adobes, and we started building with those. And at the beginning, it was really interesting because the people in the neighborhood made fun of us in the sense they were like, "Oh, you're going to be raising rabbits here, or whatever you're doing." And then once the structure was going up and once it had, nice finished plaster on it, we had a lot of people asking us, saying we would like this built for us too. And so from there it expanded. But yeah, I think it's just a very good kind of exercise to, because a lot of us who are in this field have a lot of our ideas and how we see, say permaculture as being the solution for all of the world's problems. So we think we can go somewhere and just do something and people will automatically love it. And that's not actually the case.
That's an interesting thing, isn't it, really? Because it's something that continues to baffle me, why this snowball doesn't seem to be just taking off.
Absolutely. I mean, what we saw is that there was this policy there in Valparaiso, which was basically to say, if you build your own house, you will not get any money from the government. However, if you build this, like tiny stack of OSB wood put together with pretty much no insulation, so they go through the winter freezing, and come the next fire, it just burns down anyway. But they would get money from the government, and a lot of people actually wanted that because now they were able, with that money, to buy the television, which they never had, etc., etc. So there's these dynamics which we don't necessarily understand, which are there and really need to be looked at carefully before you do anything. Because some of the things that we built could be dry toilets for the community, just got broken down because they did not want that. It wasn't something that was, appropriate for them. And so, it's this thing where then the permie groups would feel super offended because they've put so much time and work into it and it was the perfect solution, but no, it just didn't happen. So again, that's the reason why preparation, I think, is just so important in these kind of projects. But yeah, I think for me, what that did is it really made me focus on, I think, to not use the term natural building, to use a term that's more like appropriate building for the place. And so I usually try and go somewhere and do research about the architecture, the traditional architecture there, et cetera, how things are done, how communities function together, et cetera, to be able to come with the best suited design for a situation, for kind of people. And then even looking further, it's to say, this is how you've built so far. However, climate change may well affect the place this way, and therefore this is maybe a few of the little changes that we would put in there. But I think for me, what I love about Earthship, what Earthship has done, is really to create a kind of ecosystem as a home, have all of these systems working together. And so I really like to specialize in this, stacking systems, in a system which has a specific purpose or is an answer to a specific problem, but actually has a lot of other positive byproducts from it. So I don't know, just to think of something, the most simple example I could think of is eco bricks. I really try and push these eco bricks around, but eco bricks is basically taking a plastic bottle and compacting plastic wrappers, plastic bags inside of it. We now know that the recycling systems, a lot of the plastics cannot even be recycled. And for the ones that can be recycled, I live in the US right now, and since China has refused to accept all of the waste, it's having a terrible impact here. And a lot of these plastics that were normally going to be recycled are now going to landfills as well. So we're talking about, single use plastics that now turn into a bottle. Just looking at, first of all, these plastics beforehand, my experience in Cameroon was that someone would be drinking from a plastic bottle, that say the taxi driver, and he just chucks it by the window. It's like a normal thing. It's not going to shock anyone. And, looking at the culture, the banana peel, you chuck it, it turns into compost. Perfect. No problem. Plastic, slightly different issue. And so during rainy season, all of these plastics would go to the streams, would go to the rivers, would maybe block the streams, they would overflow, it might create accidents, it might destroy different types of infrastructure, it might get mixed with the outhouse, all the sewage now mixes with the rest, goes on the ground, the mama puts her food on the ground, contaminated, and now you have a cholera outbreak or something else. It's just, it's like from one simple bottle, plastic bottle, we now have all of these different issues. And now you look at these houses I was talking about before that get extremely hot, and you can now use these plastic bottles, these eco bricks, to insulate them as a retrofit. And now people within them will be healthier, etc., etc. I don't want to, list all of the things, but it's to say like several, one thing that causes several problems now can create a lot of different solutions in itself. This is without even talking about, water harvesting, treating wastewater, etc. Just plastic bottle, because, it can be that simple. So this is what I'm basically doing now, is being in California and having experience, having seen the fires, having seen how a lot of these houses are built with what could be described as kindling and toxic wastes. And come the fire, they burn down. Post-fire, they're built back the same way. And so for me, it's really important being in this place right now to try to come with the appropriate solutions for this. So with the help of Florencia Maciel, who I also met through Earthship, who's an architect, we basically drew a plan for what could be a proposal for an earthquake-resistant, fireproof home, very relevant to here in California. And I've been giving a few presentations here and there, and there's already a few people interested, so I'm trying to work with them to see how this could come together. Then on another side, I've been involved with these cob tests to test the fire resistance and the seismic resistance with different types of reinforcement in the cob wall. This is being headed by someone called Art Ludwig, who's doing a great work in that way, because he has a plan of building a little community. So he's basically trying with cob techniques. So he went the whole way to get these tests done so that he can build this community. And I think that's great. It's like you have a mission, and this is all of the different things you're ready to do in order to get the appropriate data so that people, who are responsible for codes, for permits, etc., have the relevant data, and the engineers can sign off, etc., etc.
Yeah, we've got a very similar thing going here, which we're working towards. A commune is collaborating with the Politecnico of Torino, which is one of the big sort of technical universities in Italy, and an association that I'm a part of. And the idea is literally, as you say, to create an example and measure it for seismic properties, structure, chemical sort of potential chemical leaching, or etc., etc., and just get the codes written up and updated so they can move forwards on a bigger scale.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important that all of us being in different places in the world, if we can try to create these collaborations with universities, with, scientists, engineers, especially, I would say students, engineering students, a lot of them do see a lot of the problems going on in the world. The education itself hasn't incorporated yet some of what we're doing. And so to be able to go out there and just plant the seed, just to say, this is what it is possible. This is what we do. Is anyone interested? And then, if a teacher can, just be interested, and students, these kind of tests are now ongoing. So here in Southern California, I'm working with Cal Poly, so I'm doing some teaching with them as well. And there's a teacher who, from the test that we did, it was at Quail Springs Permaculture, an amazing place, and they're doing some great work too. That teacher now said that he saw it was kind of outdoor testing, and, that has its own kind of problems as well. So he decided, no, next year in his lab, he wants the students to build all kinds of walls, and they're going to do different kinds of testings on these walls.
Oh, wow. Will that information be published then?
Absolutely. Right now, I'm going to be making a documentary about the test which we did, but we're still waiting for the information. What's amazing is there were 2 students who came afterwards to a natural building course at Quail Springs who, were told about the experiments and everything else. And they work for Google, and Google gives some kind of extra time, from what I understand, to its employees to do their own research as well. And so one of them, they're a couple, but one of them basically creates models. So he's going to use this data to create models and to actually be able to, in a sense, continue the testing, digitally, basically. And I think at this stage, we're also not only thinking like the testing is important, but we're actually trying to figure out what is the most appropriate way to test these materials, because they are different from other materials. And we're not necessarily, having these straight walls. We have round walls, etc. So how would be the best ways to test them? And that, I think, is actually the first exercise, that first test, which will then lead to the most relevant data that we're looking for.
Cool. And what's the timeline on that then?
Well, he's going to get the data now, and he's going to be working on that. But at the same time, Cal Poly is also analyzing the data. I'm not exactly 100% sure when it's gonna be coming out. I think this summer we should already have some of the data. But I think, if I can just say, something from it, we're not, like, no one who was involved is really allowed to talk about too much about it until, we have the data. But what we did see, from the test is that a double reinforcement, but with a thin mesh, seemed to actually be extremely resistant, more resistant than something that's very firm and extremely solid, actual tubes, metal tubes in there. That the kind of one with a double mesh in there seemed to actually be the strongest. So that's just for some people, if they're building their own home and they don't have any problem with permits and they do want to add some reinforcement. That's what I would kind of say from just what we have seen so far, is that was a really relevant way. So this is what's going on here. I'm also looking at buying a piece of land in a place called Joshua Tree, which is pretty much in the desert, and to turn it into a test site where we would build tiny homes, which the county now looks like as fine, as okay to do. It used to be much more difficult. So to build tiny homes with different building techniques, and then have the university, have the students help to build it so they get that experience as well. But basically then equipped with sensors, different sensors, to be able to get relevant data from them. That is now what I'm looking at. And not only building, but also food production in somewhere, very arid area. I think with climate change, it's, wherever right now may be flush and even tropical, could become a very arid area in I want to say 50 years from now, but it could be way sooner. So it would also be to try and find appropriate ways again to grow food in these kind of areas. So it's to look at the whole lot. I think to look at natural building without looking at food production and, water management and all these different things is kind of irrelevant. It has to encompass all of these different things. A big aspect too is community. People, how are we going to live together? How are we going to take decisions? How can we create another model, economic model in a sense? And all of these different questions have to be looked at as well.
These are some of the questions that I actually interestingly wanted to get onto. Before we move away from testing and data, I just wanted to check with you if you've seen or what you think the chances are, or if you agree that we need a sort of wiki or one place where all this information can be accessible almost. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of stuff going on, and I haven't seen a really great example yet of the sort of the information being harvested and distributed in a really effective way, because so many people are finding out so many different things, and this is something that you seem to have your finger on the pulse with in terms of the kind of posts you put up on it. It's Transition Now, the Facebook page, isn't it? Is it Transition Now?
A group, yeah, a group.
Sorry, a group. Yeah. So do you know of anything that's happening in terms of really sort of putting this information together and getting it out in an effective way?
Well, I mean, there's a few different things that do exist, but as you say, it doesn't. That there hasn't been one kind of set that has taken over. I created, Transition Now and other groups in order to get, people who are interested in the same things to be able to share, their experiences and findings, etc., with one another. So no, I think that's a very good point. I think right now everybody's kind of having to do their own research. So, it'll be buying the relevant books, watching these YouTube tutorials, looking for specific things now on Instagram, with a hashtag, and then you can find different things there. But I think it's just being kind of at this stage trying to look at all these different mediums and finding the appropriate places where you can find the information you're looking for. And I think again it's this thing of, I remember, a long time ago I was speaking to someone in Africa. I was going to this village, and I think I was speaking to someone about permaculture. It was like a long time ago, at the beginning I was just so excited about it. And so when I gave the explanation of what it was, the lady just told me, but this is what we do. This is what we've been doing forever, and it was just like, oh yeah, of course, that's true. And, they had the three sisters planted together. They had different ways of managing the water, the rain, etc. I mean, all of these things were thought out. So wherever you are, if you can connect back with people. So a lot of the natural building techniques, came also in, farm areas. Farms were built that way, etc. And it's, if you can just, take a little trip there and go and speak to these people, they'll be most happy to see people who are actually interested in what they do, rather than looking at them, kind of in a demeaning way. And try and understand how things are done where you are. And then, the other thing that permaculture says is just to examine nature, just to look at it and see how it functions. So, I would say with technology is one thing, and how we can create, a better space to share information. And then I would say the other one is just to disconnect completely from that and to just go out there and try and learn everything you can from the people who are still doing it a specific way, whose children and grandchildren have maybe left that village or whatever, because they were not interested. But if someone can come and just be, hello, elder, I'm interested in what you have to say. Here I come bearing a gift. Can I just sit here and listen to you? I think that's also a great way to get a lot of information.
Yeah, that's my impression. It feels like there's a lot of information that's not put in one place. For example, a wiki, a natural building wiki would be great. Yeah, you touched just now on community, which is something I've been thinking about for a while and want to get involved in eventually. But it feels like the big one, doesn't it? In terms of humans are difficult beasts sometimes, and we can be lovely beasts and difficult beasts, and that's what makes us wonderful. But how do we, in this age of individualization and four Netflix accounts for a family of four, how do we sort of breach that, and how do we come back together as communities? Because it is the thing that seems to make us happiest, as being part of a group and feeling it to be an important part of a group. What sort of examples have you seen or thoughts do you have on community in general?
Well, I think from the different places I've been to, stayed at, etc. I would say one important aspect is to, again, it's this preparation planning stage, is to devise a kind of charter, a kind of constitution in a sense for your community that is very clear and that everybody can agree upon. I'm finding this with business as well, contracts between people, things being clearly stated so that there's no confusion later, or so that people know exactly what it is that they need to do or don't have to do. I find that having that and having the clarity within it is very important. So even having worked with the Airship Academy in Taos for those years, what I found interesting there too is Phil, basically, the kind of second in charge, we could say, of Earthship in a sense. He gave this really great talk on communities based on some of the experience that happened there in the greater world. And he in a sense, he was getting a lot of information from the students, from their ideas, etc., which I think he's probably thinking of creating a community maybe somewhere else at some stage, thanks to all of that. But what's interesting with it is you had, groups forming, and then you have like one vegan in there, and the vegan says, I don't want any animals, even milk or chickens for eggs. I don't want any of that there. So it's really this thing of, okay, what's the community about? What binds us together, to find that kind of common thread, common vision that's weaving us all together here right now, and that's really gonna be, in a sense, the fuel for this community to go ahead. And so, if you have these divisions from the beginning and they're not addressed, that is going to create huge craters within the community itself. Then what you do also have is, from somewhere like Auroville in India, which I also went to, you had a bunch of pioneers at the beginning who went and who really had one way of seeing things. And the first thing they actually did was just to reforest the area. It was a barren land. And now you have new generations to come, and there was no money, but now there is money for specific extra things. And so when there was only one kind of toilet paper, which, probably everybody agreed it's soft and resistant enough to be okay, we'll just have this. Now they have 5 different ones, etc., etc. And people want to have a house there, but they don't want to spend as much time. And so there's less, they have less kind of real interest in how things are done and how decisions are made. And so it's kind of put, in a sense, the direction away from its original intent. But a lot of the people who are kind of in this sociocracy decision making kind of nucleus say it's just part of the evolution. We had to go through this so that we can find the way to address it, in a sense. And I do find that interesting too. I think if we just look at globalization as one big community, right? I think by now we've all seen a lot of the problems with it. And I think a lot of communities around the world who aspired to it, through some of it because of films they saw, Hollywood films, others because, yeah, they just see all these buildings and all these new cars and all of these different things, and they just aspire to that. And so they put their own culture aside. They try to go in that direction. And then I think all of us hit a moment where we just say, I feel empty. I've lost I've lost a bit of my spirit, a bit of my soul. I need to find this embrace of what is mine again, and kind of dive down. And the problem at that point that I see is that it can often lead to extremes because of that void, because it's so present, because you really need something so bad, and then the right people are able to convince you or whatever, and you just go to an extreme. But you do see it as a cycle. You see it as, we are going in this direction. We see it as being the best, and then we are disappointed, and we now go back to what we know, what we see as tradition. And I think that is really an important facet. And I think even looking at immigration and different things is to say, someone comes to the community. The community, first of all, if you have a community and you're self-sufficient, there is no urban, sprawling, etc. It's like, we have space for this many more people. We are happy to come and teach you, and then you recreate your own somewhere else, but you have limits, right? And so, first of all, even in terms of that, it's to say, okay, in terms of how many people we can have in our community, there are these set boundaries. Then someone coming in and basically not feeling at home or not feeling welcome or whatever it is, the idea is, well, there are other communities out there that might be best suited for you. And in a sense, even to encourage this, and there are websites, there's the Eco Village kind of network, etc. So in a sense, you could be looking and trying to find the one that's most appropriate for you from the beginning, and then going there and seeing if it works out or not. But yeah, I do think it's important to have a kind of clear vision of what this community is about, and holding that shared value together, and working towards that, I think, is very important. So again, it's just to say that preparation stage. Then in terms of decision making, there's a lot of different tools, methodologies that exist, and it's hard to say at this stage if one is better than another. I think, again, we're talking about appropriate, mechanisms for the people who decide to be there. In some cases, I have seen that having a kind of boss, a kind of person who takes the ultimate decisions, has made it easier. In other case, I've seen, how beautiful it might take much longer for a decision to be taken, but having everyone's input in there and then finding that right balance that suits everyone really worked. I think it really depends, but what I'm really looking forward to in the future is to have more communication about these different experiences, and not necessarily, I think in a lot of cases, the negative aspects try to be hidden a little bit, like, we'll address it, but let's keep it in the closet kind of thing. But I think it's really positive if it can be kind of out there. Sometimes you can even get, exterior people from the exterior who give their own advice as well, and that can be helpful. So yeah, I think it's really a mix, and it really depends. I would say again, like, if you're going to be in a community, do think properly about the people who you want to create this community with from the beginning. How well do you know them? Have you been, I often said this also, like, in terms of friendships, or, even love partners or whatever, if you've just known each other in this setting and you've never been outside, go to like a country where it is completely different. It might be a little harsher conditions. Try to go without planning anything and just see how well you do together, in a sense, It's kind of like try and figure out who you're dealing with before you set out on this pretty epic journey, which it's if you're going to be building your house with other people in this community, you do want to make sure that there's a good harmony between everyone.
Absolutely. Have you been up to Findhorn at all?
I haven't actually, I'm in touch with them, so I'm following them through different means, but it's one of my aspirations. Like I'm half Scottish as well, so every time I go back to Scotland, I feel this kind of mesmerizing feeling within me. So that will probably be my next reason to go back to Scotland, in a sense. Have you been there?
I have not. It's the same as you. It's super high on the list. I feel like it'd be great to take some time to visit different places before venturing into something of my own eventually, possibly. But it's learning from other people. I've been to an interesting one here, which was called Damanhur, which is... Have you heard of Damanhur at all?
Wait, sorry, I thought you in Italy? Are you
Yeah,
not in Italy?
yeah,
You are?
in Italy, yeah.
Oh, no, I haven't, no.
Yeah, it's called Damanhur, and it's like this... They were famous for what many people called the eighth wonder of the world.
Okay.
And it was this underground cave system that was totally painted with art everywhere. And they have some crystals down there that they believe that they clean, and they feel that they're sort of nurturing. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but they feel like they're nurturing the earth's soul and stuff, and they're pretty out there. But they have this incredible cave system with secret passages and stuff. And I actually went there with Mike because there's a possibility of doing a project, and they wanted to get involved with some stuff, and they really pulled out all the stops and opened up all the secret passages. It was quite wild. They seem to work really well. There are 600 people. They have their own school. They're pretty wacky, but they've just got it together. And their founder died recently, and they're making the transition, which is always a very big deal.
Right.
But the cave ended up being discovered, and they thought that the authorities thought that they were, because it was secret at first. The authorities thought that they were doing some sort of drug lab or something, and came in to try and to shut it all down. And the guy apparently went down into the cave and came back out in tears because of the beauty of it. So yeah, pretty interesting. If you ever get a chance, it's in the Aosta Valley. It's worth checking out. So just to sort of wrap up, where do you think things are going? Where do you think the main concentration needs to be? What's your take on the sort of future of the off-grid world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is in community. I think it's when you aspire towards self-sufficiency, one of the main things that you learn is you cannot do it alone. You need other people. So I think community is a huge one, and I think it's going to be about, on one side, it can be, people who decide to go, like you were saying, with those caves outside of the authorities, etc. So what you have, say, here happen in California, someone built a super adobe dome somewhere in the forest illegally, and basically the fire just burnt everywhere around and the dome survived. And I think, in a sense, that is a great statement, because they're not able to build it. But it works. So it's kind of what I think, we have behind us, or kind of to help us out, is sense. It's common sense. It's like
Uncommon common sense.
Right, in a sense, uncommon right now, but it should become common sense again. But I think once it's out there and people see it, and the information is out, then it works. It's a little bit like the people who are growing food on their front lawn, in those suburbs. who got fined at first and looked at the reason, and they had to come up with a reason, and so the reason was aesthetic pollution or something. And so they went to all the neighbors and they just got them to sign a petition, and then suddenly, oh no, it's accepted because actually these people don't think it's ugly and think it does make sense. So I think it's that on one side, and then on the other, I think it really is about the people who are going to be taking this to the next level in terms of making it mainstream. And so I really want to congratulate all of the people who are on that path and encourage the ones who are thinking of doing that, in the sense of, like they had a talk recently to see if natural building, I think it was specifically cob, was worthwhile or not. And the people, it was like, I think 10-1 saying no. And the reasons they gave were very simple. It was just, there's no data. We don't see, we can't know if it's relevant or not because there's no specific data on it. And so I think it's about, those of us who are really going to, put some effort in trying to get that data available for others to be able to, in the future build their houses the way they want to, without having to, be digging inside of a cave. Unfortunately for them, they might not have these beautiful stones, but, at least they won't be looked down upon or seen as outcasts in a sense.
I totally agree. It seems like that's what definitely what is needed here and in most places, because there has to be the permits are the big block, aren't they, to so many projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was Ted Berniger. He gave a great presentation. He was just explaining about codes, because a lot of people see them as the enemy, but behind codes there's a lot of necessary aspects to look at towards security, etc.
Absolutely.
And the way he was mentioning is like back in, say, Mesopotamia, if you hire an architect to build your house and the house falls onto your wife when you were out working or whatever, and she dies, then you would have the right to kill the architect's wife. That, in a sense, is trying to get the architect to do the best job possible. I think codes, permits do have that intrinsic, kind of value of trying to uphold a standard, which should be there. The problem is now is it has really been written, in a sense, for conventional building materials, and so we need to be able to rewrite it for these, say, ancient ways which made a lot of sense. If we look at old villages, old medieval villages, in terms of passive design, etc., it's just unbelievable. It's amazing. I get so much inspiration just looking back. And at the same time, all of these modern technologies and techniques which we have, and kind of combining both in the best suited way, I think is going to be really interesting. And I think this is really the stage where we're at now, where there's a lot of work to be done.
Can you mention to people where they can go to find out more about what you're doing? Join up with any groups or anything that you think people might enjoy, and anything like that.
Sure. I mean, I've just created this website. It's called regenerativesystems.com with a hyphen in the middle, the minus sign. And so there's a blog. There's going to be a blog on it, and so I will be sharing about the cob test there. I'm going to be sharing about different projects that I'm doing, a lot of retrofitting here where I'm staying, which is the Urban Homestead, a wonderful place. And so I'm just trying to, they're doing the most amazing job in terms of food production and community building. And so I'm just trying to integrate some systems to make them a little bit more self-sufficient on different grounds. So I'm going to be sharing, like every time I come up with a system or something, putting it on there. And then, on Facebook, there's different groups. Transition Now is one for people who are interested in Earthship. There's Earthship Inspired Community. And then another one which I create called Bioescultura. That one, the intent behind it was actually to have people create works of arts kind of anywhere using natural recycled materials, just so people see it, just so people see this was trash. Now, hopefully it looks good, but it looks different. It's been changed into something new. So I'm actually getting more and more in the artistic side also, to try and work there too. So yeah, I would say those groups, and also to look at the website with information that we're putting out. Yeah, that would be mainly it. And I think I just wanted to say one little thing about what you were saying now.
Yeah.
I think about the situation that we have, and this kind of feeling of lack of power. It's so big, it's so powerful, we can't do anything. We're already seeing, say, here in the political spectrum in the US, these candidates, which I think, like a few years ago, it would have been like unseeable, unfathomable how they would have, gotten to where they're now, say in Congress or wherever. And they're able to do it. And they say they're there for the long run. They're there to win. They're there to make the change. And, even going back to the UN, the way that it was conceived at the beginning was, just to have this kind of elite group of world leaders, coming together and taking decisions. And it's because of the pressure of, the NGOs, these associations, that they managed to make their way in, and that now, to some extent, they're being listened to. So I think it's really that thing of just not taking anything for granted, and trying to push whatever you see fit, and finding the appropriate people to help you do that, I think is very important. And so what I have seen also from my experience is, you can have in the political world, in business, in anywhere, there's specific people who really understand you and who can help make things happen. So I think it's really, do communicate, go out there, speak with them, see who is lending an ear, and see what you can do from there. I think it's very important.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, the examples at the moment of things changing it's very plentiful, in the sense that, have you seen the Extinction Rebellion stuff that happened in London? Absolutely amazing. I mean, there's a few amazing points there, I think. One is that they've just got everyone talking to a level that was unimaginable 2 years ago, it feels like. Mm-hmm. They've done it super peacefully. They're really organized. They have all of their sort of advice and legal sort of aspects and stuff. And just the other thing is that I think in the past, people would tell me, I mean, this isn't a fact, but I believe them, that there'll be plainclothes policemen sometimes that would be agitating to give people excuses to the riot police to come in and clear things away. But now we've got this situation where we can film, everyone is filming everything, and that has its downsides, but it also means that the CCTV cameras are watching us, but we're sort of watching them, if you like. And that they stopped the traffic in the whole of London, and no one heard about it here. It was not on any of the mainstream news.
Oh, interesting.
It's so interesting. You learn so much from what isn't news sometimes.
Interesting and unsurprising at the same time.
Yeah. So I talk about that a lot here in lessons and stuff, and it just goes to show, I think Cambridge University is divesting from fossil fuels now. They've had the eyes of the world looking at them, and things are changing. It's sometimes difficult to see, a plant growing, but they definitely do. It's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, very encouraging. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for finishing on that positive note.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's good to hear you. Take care.
Great to chat to you. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Before you go, or rather immediately after you've gone, please go down to iTunes, leave a review, help us grow, get more guests, raise more money for projects. We have other projects coming up. You can find news about those on offgrid.vision, where you can also get access to other shows and some phenomenal t-shirts which go towards, well, the profit of which goes towards new projects. If you have any requests for someone to come on the show, do let me know via the site. Until next time, thanks for listening, and see you soon.